Tail mostly tied up. You'll see all the knots in there. Now how you'll know you'll miss spots is, remember I cut her tail level? That's why that was important. When you look at her tail now, it's not level. You'll see how some of this is real short and there's still real long areas in it. Those long areas are places I haven't tied a knot yet. So what I'll do is I'll look at that and be like, okay, I missed it. And I'll grab this long area and kind of shake it, and it'll bring that piece of tail to the top. And look, you're like, holy smokes, there's a lot of tail there that still doesn't have knots. And so that's where you start back. And typically it is the middle of the tail because that's, you know, if you start at the sides, it's harder to get to the middle of it. You'll see that sometimes it gets a little messy in here. This isn't exactly a straight piece of tail, that's fine. Just tie the knot in it. And when you do that, you'll kind of pull it downward and that'll even the hair out there. So see, I'm gonna pick up again from the bottom of the tail where it's nice and long, kind of shake it, and you're like, okay, well, that's a knot, it can go away. Here's this whole section of tail that is not in knots. So I'm gonna pick it up about finger length, twist it again. Same thing, pick it up about finger length, make sure it's not tangly. Tie the knot, and yes, tangly is a word. Oh, there's a knot. We'll just separate it out of the groups, no big deal. You'll notice that knot's a little lower than the rest. That's my fault. I can fix it if I want it to be absolutely beautiful. But it doesn't always matter. Okay, so now it hangs up in there with everybody else. Again, I'm gonna pick from the long hair on the bottom. And you'll get better at doing this where you don't have so much long hair. I left a lot of long hair so that I could show you guys how to find it. Usually when I'm done tying a tail, I just have a couple of strands maybe that I missed. And Ubli here is being very patient. If you have a very impatient horse, it's possible you might have to do this in stages, especially if they've got a lot of tail, because it takes some time. And it definitely takes time the first time you do it. Learning to tie the knots can be a pain in the rear, and trying to get them the right size. And so again, I'm gonna let her tail hang, and now you can see there's just a couple of strands that look too long. I'm gonna grab them from the bottom and shake them. Come up here and sort through. There's a knot. We don't want that. We want this. I'm running my fingers through it to get all of the stuff to hang like it should, and you'll see there's some long hairs. Then I'm going to pick those long hairs up and shake them, and follow them up the tail. Voila, there it is, hiding in there, knotless. Just kind of get everything out of the way the best you can. And the first time you do this on a horse like Ubli here, she's got a very uneven tail. It's not going to be perfect. It might not hang completely level. On your own horse that you keep at home and you keep this up and you keep their tail cut and you keep it clean, rinse it after every ride, keep the sweat and dirt out of it, the thicker, healthier, and more level this tail is going to get every time you tie it up. Hers is so uneven. There's a long piece up here. So there's a piece that I guess I tied up and it didn't need tied up. So I'm going to collect the hair with it. Oh, my finger's stuck. Stick it down in there. So now you see, you look at her tail, this is much more level. There's still some stragglers in it. You can kind of work with those and see what you got. Sometimes you'll find that those stragglers do run back up to a knot. The knot may have pulled tighter, so the tail's longer, or the tail is uneven because that's the first time I'd trimmed her tail up. It might not have all been brushed out straight. It drives me nuts that there's longer pieces. And I might even, after I get it all tied, I might cut some of those longer pieces even. But you see there's a longer piece, and I followed it up the tail and it's all tied in knots. So that's how it's supposed to be. It's all tied up. So you'll look through the tail here and you'll see all the knots. They're all about the same height. It could be better, could be much more perfect. I don't plan on taking her to show anywhere with her tail tied up, so I'm not worried about it. But you see all these knots in here. And the coolest thing is that they don't pull tight. See there, it's snagged, it pulls, but it comes loose again. What makes this better than a tail bag is that if she were to catch a knot in the fence, she'd rip this chunk of hair out. But it's a little bitty chunk, remember, size of fingers? So she'd rip that out and you probably wouldn't see it. Now if she caught her tail bag, braided into her hair in a fence, and ripped it out, she could do a lot more damage to her tail. Same with just braiding it and leaving the braid in. If she catches a tail or a braid, she could rip the whole thing out. But not these knots. If she catches them, they pull tight and spring back, or maybe it cuts this one knot out of there, but that's a pretty insignificant amount of tail. So now that we've got it all tied up, we're gonna untie this top part here. Remember, this is what's gonna cover it. And it's gonna be kinky because I've had it tied up. But you're gonna untie it, kind of brush it out. I got a little knot tied in there. Come here, little knot. I caught that one with my finger. I'll stick it back where it goes. Okay. So there we have it. Shake her tail, get it all free. This kinky stuff that I had tied up will straighten back out. And now we can see that her tail is completely off the ground. Can you back up? Her tail is completely off the ground. There's no way she's gonna step on it. And these knots can stay in for a month, 2 months at a time, just depends. Every time I ride this horse, I will rinse her tail out, knots included. I won't ever brush the tail with the knots. That's common sense, but just so nobody tries, don't ever brush this tail with the knots. You might gather it up and brush the very end of it out if you just have to, but don't ever try to brush through the tail with the knots. That's a bad idea. I will rinse the tail out every time. I might even soap it and rinse it out because it's important it stays clean. Every time you ride your horse, or if they're really sweaty, gross, you want to rinse this tail out. Urine and poop and dirt makes tails brittle. Also, like we talked about, her udders, they were filthy. And you can see all this breakage at the top of her tail. She was rubbing this out because her tail was stuck, like I showed. She was rubbing it out because her tail was stuck under there being itchy, and her udders were filthy. If I keep her udders clean and her tail clean, the rubbing should stop. And there we have it. That's how you take care of a tail.